Today's episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Albert Lee Seed. Here at Back to the Roots, it is our goal to create connections with organic farmers across the country. Now we'd like to connect you with a leading provider of organic and non-GMO farm seed in Albert Lee Seed. Cover crops, forages, small grains, corn, and soybeans. Albert Lee Seed is helping organic and transitioning farmers diversify their crop rotations and create healthy herds, healthy soil, and healthy humans. Whether you're looking for organic oats for cover cropping, highly digestible alfalfa, or a 105-day non-GMO corn hybrid, Albert Lee has got you covered. In fact, they were the first farm seed company in the industry to offer guaranteed levels of non-GMO purity in their Viking corn and soybean line. Check out their website at www.alseed.com to see their farm seed lineup or to request a catalog. And thank you to Albert Lee Seed.
You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood today, we are sitting down with Ray Archuleta. Really excited to have this opportunity. We're at the Northern Indiana Grazing Conference, and Ray is kind enough to sit down with us this morning. So, Ray, thanks for being here, and could you just give us a little bit of a background on where you came from and kind of what your mission is today?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mike and Brian. It was good to have you here. Well, my mission is to spread the gospel of soil health, regenerative farming, and it's more, and combine it with a little bit of, a lot of agroecology, and I call it biomimicry, mimicking life and mimicking nature. I started this whole thing about, I'm an ex-retired government employee with NRCS. It used to be called Soil Conservation Service. And I think really my journey started back in, when I was an agronomist in Idaho. Well, actually Oregon. I worked in Oregon and lived in Idaho. And I started pondering why we're having so many problems. Why are farmers going broke? It really bothered me. I just couldn't put my hands on it. And I'm talking about very good farmers. Or they couldn't even bring their sons and daughters into the operation because they had to work out. The son had to work outside the house. I could not understand why you cannot make a living on 500 prime acres in Idaho. We had water. The soil was amazing, yet couldn't do it. Just could not do it. And then another thing is every time irrigation season came on, that beautiful emerald green Snake River, because it separates the border between Oregon and Idaho, would turn to chocolate right at my border, where I was kind of responsible as a district conservationist, And it wasn't uncommon that the lake was being filled with sediment and have algal blooms. And I'm quickly reminded of, as I'm talking about this, that there was an event where several animals were killed because they ate the algal bloom water, filled water. So I started thinking about it, what is going on? And it wasn't until I got transferred into North Carolina and I became the soil quality specialist. And then later the name came soil health specialist because that's easier to convey. But I had national responsibility for teaching that. So I had a very fortunate career because I started my career 7 years in New Mexico. Started on the bottom as a technician, engineering, designing livestock systems, irrigation systems. Then put 5 years in Missouri, water quality specialist, irrigation specialist. Then I went to Oregon, district conservationist, agronomist, and finally 10 years in North Carolina. People could say I couldn't hold a job, and that's probably the case. And I think my kids think they were military kids, because I moved. But I had a rich 32 years, but it was really 12 years ago that I had my aha moment. I call it my road to Damascus, where if you remember your Bible narrative where Paul gets struck blind, I think God used that time to get struck blind, and I remember to get my attention, it was when I went to Gabe Brown's ranch. And it was there, and reading Ellen Savory's book at the time, I said, oh my goodness, I missed it. It's about the biology. It's always been about the biology. But not just that, but a holistic view how important the biology is. And it was there I started my intense journey that I said, this has to be given to all the landowners. And I never forgot the blowback. I said, but surely people know about this already, you know. Surely it's and to my amazement, the last 12 years, I've been in every state from Alaska, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Mexico, Canada. I realize, no, we don't. That producers do not have a fundamental understanding how the soil works. Mm-hmm. And that included me. And I included many graduates from every university. It was a rare event that I could listen to somebody that really had a good fundamental understanding of the soil. And it was shocking to me. So that's how this journey came for me. It was a journey, and it's continuing to be a journey. And we're very excited because people are getting it. They're getting the concepts. And I think we altered the construct. I think we altered the discussion in the USDA, especially in NRCS. Do I know if it's going to stick? I don't know, but there's always so many conflicting powers. But the beauty is where we're at. And if you were to Google soil health, the term soil health, years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, you maybe have a couple of thousand hits. Now, last time I looked was 78 million hits. I mean, it's huge. It's kind of the key code soil health. So that's how we started that.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think that you said you were talking to farmers and you realized that they didn't know what you were finding out or what you all of a sudden aha moment saw. Where does that start? That these farmers aren't taught this?
Well, one of the things is that, to be honest, guys, I kind of had to re-educate myself too. I started reading every book on agroecology and soil ecology. That was the kind of the foundational for me that I started reading. And one of the things is that if you don't have the knowledge I think if you're a reader, if you can read and just get fundamental starting books that are fundamentally simple and start off that way, and then you can work yourself into a deeper knowledge. But I'll be very honest about it. I don't think you just need the fundamental principles, ecological principles, and a fundamental understanding who's doing what. Because you can go down this rabbit hole into the most complex ecosystem on the planet. There's millions of species of bacteria, millions, and they'll probably find more. It is the most complex ecosystem on the planet. Scientists are learning more and more about it. So if you learn something about it, it's going to change. Mm-hmm. But there is a fundamental knowledge of just having the ecological principles. You're just as good off because the system will heal on itself. You don't have to be as in-depth or nerdy as myself. But where it starts is start hanging or talking to people that think differently or starting to think like you. That's the start building a community and start reading the right books. And if they go onto the website like Soil Health Academy, we have lists of the books that we recommend. That'll be a good start.
Well, and I think it just starts with a curiosity.
Yes.
On the farmer's part. And too many times, I think farmers get caught in their own rut. They're almost too close to the situation, and it's just the way it's always been, and this is the way we're always going to do it. But then you talk with, and I'm sure you've seen this in the last 15 years, farmers that all of a sudden they might have the same aha moment, or they might just see a little teeny tiny thing that happened on their own farm that all of a sudden opens up this whole wide world that then they're asking questions, and then the ball starts rolling, and that is fun to watch because, with the farmers that we work with, that's probably one of the funnest parts about the job is, we're talking, I know you're not only talking organic, and we can get into some of that, but we primarily work in the organic world. Yeah. And these are folks that are trying to apply a system that mimics nature. That's fundamentally what organic should be. Mm-hmm. And, whether it's being done all over the place is a side argument or a side debate, but that is so fun to watch. And I'm sure you've talked to many farmers that are going down that road. And like you said, I think one of the hard parts for Mike and I, or any farmer, is that you can almost get overwhelmed by some of the science that's out there. Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to know. And I think you would probably admit that you don't know everything about this ecosystem. We never will.
That's right.
Because it's so complex. But understanding that feeding the soil life is the key, I think, is probably the best place to start.
I think, Brian, you said two beautiful things you've said, and I think are more important than what I even said. Observation, and it's incredibly powerful. We have lost the science and art of observation. But there's another thing that happens too that I see, and it has started to happen to me: failure. It's okay to fail. It's failure, and the external pressures, the financial pressures, start making you think and make you raise an awareness that something's going wrong, or why did that fail, or why did that work? I think you hit the thing spot on. It's those kind of things that happened to me that were subtle, but yet they were incredibly important, that made us start to search. So I think you're exactly, that's the most exciting part. Then you start going down the book. Like for me, I went ferociously into these books. But at the same time, you're going onto farms and starting putting the pieces together. And you're right. We will never get it. So you don't have to go to college to get this. In fact, sometimes it can be a hindrance if you're not careful, because you can learn a lot of the wrong things. So sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes the people that pick this up and are the best farmers never went to college, and never went to college, and they never grew up on the farm. Mm-hmm. And they just do amazing things because there's no restrictions, no mental paradigms to overcome.
And I think working with the plain community, they actually have a little bit of an advantage, because growing up Amish, there's no TV, there's no radio, you read. So these farmers love reading. That's their entertainment. So when you live like where I live in Holmes County, where land is anywhere from 25 to 65,000 per acre, you have this farm, and you want the small family farm is under attack with big ag. So they have to look at different systems if they want the next generation to farm. And our goal is to help that farmer be profitable enough that the kids take an interest and the next generation will take over. But I think it's financial pressure. You mentioned the financial pressures, mm-hmm. and also the curiosity of a different system that really gets the minds turning on mm-hmm. this, and gets people. And once they see, hey, this system works, little by little, then they get excited. And all of a sudden, why didn't I think about this 20 years ago? Mm-hmm. But that's the exciting part to me, is when they start seeing the fruits of their labor.
It's beautiful, Mike. I tell you, it's a lot of things that we picked up, and some of the aha moments that we came across that I'm beginning to see came from concepts that, and I think the plain community, like you're talking about, picked up and I think they call us the English, right? Or mm-hmm. We infiltrated. Not only did we infiltrate the plain community, but in the world. Even the Native Americans we work with, the Iowa tribe. I work with an Iowa tribe. They all were inculcated with this type of reductionist science that permeates the world. Now, reductionist science is that you break things into individual little pieces and you study it because of the complexity. But holistic science says now you back up a little bit, understand how all the pieces connect, and make the collective whole. That's what I loved about Alan's book, because it taught me back up, and watch the relationship to all the little pieces. And then, but that's what's happened. The plain community got infiltrated. Every one of us that have been exposed to school, we were taught reductionist, because if you remember how we were set up when we went to college, Brian, you remember how the departments, they had one department here, one department here. They taught agronomy separate, soil separate. And then if you took an ecology class, you took it at another department. So everything was very fragmented. So when I left school, I had a very fragmented view. And that was very destructive, because it wasn't helpful, because you have to have a holistic view and understand how everything's connected and all have relationship to each other. And then when you're trying to make decisions out there and try to analyze what's going on, it's fragmented and it's not helpful. One of the biggest things that we left out was the incredible microbes, not only the microbes, but all the microflora and the mesoflora, all those beautiful creatures on top under the residue, but also the organisms on the bottom. I mean, they talked about them, but they rarely ever put the pieces together for you. And they are the drivers. And who would have thought they're connected to the water cycle? My gosh, they're connected to the water cycle. They're connected to all the ecosystem processes. You cannot separate these things out. That's why I tell people it's a collective one. Quantum physics teaches everything is one. Ecology, the study of the house, everything is one. Theology, everything is one. Oneness. That's very important to understand when you're working out there. Once you understand that everything's connected, so then why would you care on the practical sense? Well, when you go out there, what will that tillage event do? What will that spraying event do? What are the repercussions of that activity? Then you start thinking very soberly what the world you do. So in another example, it's like when you get that corn or soybean or that crop out, you make that soil one again, because collectively it was designed to have a plant on it. You can't call it soil. Soil denotes biology and life. Well, where does it come from? The plant is that conduit of energy. It transforms light into chemical energy. It feeds the plethora and the myriad of biology. Now, you cannot have soil life without plant life. It will not happen. So, plant and soil. So if you take all the biology, you've got geology. So you know how critical. So again, oneness. So I think that helps. It's helped me through the years as I teach to make it simple so that everybody collects it, because I'm a simple man.
Can you give a few examples of some of those aha moments that you saw back in the day?
In the beginning of,
or at any point, just something that all of a sudden you're like, wow.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Brian, there's been many of those journeys, except, especially, I think I learned more from farmers than I learned being out in the field, because hundreds come to me, but Ray, but how about this? Or how about that? And when you guys get to be on many farms like I do. I get to do it on a national scale. And I'm telling you, there's times that I was just awestruck. And I think one of the ones that was amazing, and I didn't even get to see the actual event, but I saw PowerPoints and slides, and I finally got it. I go, wow. It was in a lot of things that were mind-blowing, guys. It was in North Dakota. When the group of farmers with Gabe and Jay Fuhrer and was the district conservationist, but the board in the Burley district did some amazing things. That they did field demonstrations. One of them was where they got the covers and they had the plots, and each individual plot had its own individual plant, and what we use for cover crop mixes. But the last couple of plots where they took each individual but mixed it like kind of a salad bowl, they call it a cocktail mix, mix it. it was there that was one of the aha moments, Brian, where we saw the power of life. And what happened there was, if you grew the individual plant by itself in the plot, and the condition was the same soils, and the harsh water limitations of only 1.8 inches. I mean, it was brutal that year. That 2006, that was brutal. So when you saw the individual plants, they looked like they were burned by a torch. I mean, they were suffering for water. They looked horrible. But the amazing thing, where you had mixed all the plants together, when you mixed them all together, you took all the 5 or 6 species together, they were green. The biomass was 10 times more, 5 to 10 times more. It was amazing. Like, how can that be? One looks like it's scorched earth. The other is vibrant, growing with only 1.8 inches. What is going on? It was that day I threw my graduate weed book in the trash can about competition. See, I was taught competition. Nature is competitive. Yes, it does. Competition does happen. See, competition builds integrity. What do I mean by integrity? Health, integrity, robustness in the system. It keeps the sick, the unhealthy out of that system. So you always have health. But nobody told me that nature is predominantly collaborative. Nature is predominantly collaborative. See, if you look at the forests and how they communicate and how they share, they collaborate under huge stress. And I think it was Dr. Bartness from Brown University wrote a really good paper showing, he did a meta-analysis. What does that mean? He went through all the literature. A meta-analysis is they go through all the literature talking about a particular subject. And he found out what was manifested in that plot. When nature is under severe stress, it does not compete. It collaborates. Collaboration predominates. Does competition happen? Yes. Watch in humans. It even works in humans. I don't know if you guys remember that big hurricane that came through Texas, flooded parts of Houston. And during the normal lives of most people, they're competitive. You always hear backbiting between races and that. But that time when people went through a lot of suffering, blacks, Hispanics, all different races sitting there helping each other out. Because we're taught in the news, competition, strife, blah, blah, dichotomize, them, thus. But that day you saw collaboration working among humans. Collaboration is predominantly the whole principle. But yet in that, competition does happen to keep health and integrity in the system. So that was one of my aha moments. I said, wow, that's pretty powerful. And I never forgot that. That's why I push diversity so hard, guys, because it's the most powerful thing a producer can. Diversity of animal, diversity of insects, diversity of plants. It's all about diversity. And and that's one of the most difficult things for farmers to do, is to diverse their rotations. And it's mind-boggling how we have a love affair with monoculture. So, and even rotational diversity is tough to get promoted. Mm-hmm. So that was, Brian, I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but that was kind of my really aha moment. And I had to give kind of a background why that's so powerful. And I think that's important for farmers to understand that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, that does touch on something. You mentioned some of the folks that don't come with a university background or grew up on a farm aren't always brainwashed or whatever, however you want to call it. And me coming into the agriculture industry and seeing this stuff, and like you said, competition, it's taught from day one. Mm-hmm. And coming in from the outside, one of the first things I noticed was why is the question, like, how can I outcompete my neighbor? How can I keep it secret that I found an extra way to find an extra 5 bushels to the acre? And then also the last question, which is somewhat unassociated, but it dives into competition, is how can I kill anything and everything that's going to stop me from making that extra 5 bushels to the acre.
Yeah.
And like I said, coming from the outside, seeing that, I was like, what in the world is going on here? And that was like the breath of fresh air coming into the organic industry, is that, it's this relatively small part of agriculture, and there is a vibrant community of people. And it's the same thing with grazers. Like, I kind of got involved in that community as well, because it's tied into organic as well. But they want to share. They want to tell each other. They want to do experiments. They want to hear from people like you. They want to hear from other farmers that are doing something new. They want to share it. They want to tell everybody how neat it is to watch nature work with you rather than fight it all the time.
That paradigm is critically important. I tell you, I want to share one more thing with you guys. And I think that was an aha moment. When I traveled the whole country, this is what the entrenchment and the thought process that we were all imbibed. And it seems to me that humans do this all the time. And I just kind of was startling to me, because I do it myself. When we're doing with natural systems, the first thing we want to say, and especially talking to farmers, because farmers tell me this: Ray, we can't do this because it's too cold, too hot, or too wet. And you don't understand, Ray, our soils are different. Notice what they're saying. There's distinction. They want to delineate. It's human nature to try to delineate things. But they should also be asking themselves, with the same breath, what is in common? And rarely does that occur. Case in point. Here, come to this part of Indiana, what's in common with where I live in southern Missouri? Okay? Well, the thing is, what's in common, there's both biology in both systems. What most producers don't understand, biology works the same in Indiana, Afghanistan, Africa. It's common. They both all have soil microbes in that soil. And I kind of make fun out of it. When I went to Hawaii and we talked to a producer, and the producer was doing massive tillage. He was a potato grower, and he was applying fungicides and insecticides. And I said, I know why you have a nematode problem in this very sandy soil in Hawaii. It's an island. Never been to Hawaii. And I said, you're doing too much tillage. And he said, you're disrupting, making your nematode issue. And that's why you're having the problems. Not only the tillage, but you're spraying too much fungicides. Those two together added to his nematode problem. And he goes, well, how did you know that? And in joke, he said, I'm the soil whisperer. The reason was commonality. You have soil biology in Hawaii. So what if they speak Hawaiian? But they still function the same. What we missed is that people get so freaked out about, they think this is not Mars. There's no distinction in the border and say, oh, can't come into Indiana. There's no biology there. Well, that's ridiculous. That's what we've been taught. We look at the weather. We look at all these anomalies, soil type, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Soil biology functions the same way. And here's the other thing that's very perplexing. People forget that the farm and the ranch came from the forest and the prairie. It was hewn out of that. And it works the same way. The water cycle, the nutrient cycle, diversity, capturing solar energy, they all run on those ecosystem processes. What does that mean? The eco means the house. It's the way the house works. It's fundamental fifth grade stuff. And fifth grader would get it easier. But that's what we've done. People think that I did it. I used to think that my small farm was separate from that prairie where I was taken out of. No, it's not. It functions the same way. And it wants to be treated the same way. So those kind of fundamental concepts are important to understand. So walking out on that forest, or walking down the prairie could teach you so much on how to farm. It's amazing. And a lot of times I tell producers, Sometimes you're just farming out of ecological context. You shouldn't be doing what you do here. Case in point, Gabe Brown and I went to go speak at Holyoke, Colorado. To give you some concept of that part of the country, guys, it's about 15, 16 inches of rain. It was prairie, okay? Short, steep prairie. They're trying to grow corn there. I said, guys, it's not Indiana. It's not Iowa. It's not the I-states. You do not have the climatic conditions to raise a crop in that an ecological context. See, 1 in 10 years, they hit the mother lode and they think it's wonderful. This area should be farmed like the buffalo. You should have permanent grasses and run your cattle and your livestock like its ecological context was designed. Because every time you fight that context, you're going to go broke. It takes energy. Anytime you work against nature, you have to provide everything, the nutrients, the energy, the health. You, really, in essence, you have to play God. You're modifying all the environment. You're modifying what molecules that animal takes up when it consumes it. Is it picking up all the secondary, tertiary molecules to give it health? All the natural antibiotics, all the natural parasitizing molecules you get. You can only get it when you have diversity in that animal has the sense and the design to pick it up for there. But it can only be done by diversity. But if you reduce the system, and everybody's done it, from the plains people all over this globe, it's been simplified. And a lack of diversity. So then you have to provide all the mechanisms of health, of sustenance. You have to provide all the nutrients. You provide the water. And on top of that, you have to haul all the manure and all the waste back into the field. And if it wasn't for ancient sunlight, diesel and fertilizer and chemicals, couldn't do it. And I was talking to one of the plains people yesterday. They said, well, Ray, I plow. And, and because the Amish, the beauty about what their world is, it requires little energy. But yet it still requires energy. It's called horse energy or cultural energy. Cultural energy is you working your muscles, that kinetic energy coming from there, and plus the animal. I said, but you're wearing, and I said, Raymond, you're wearing your horse to death. I wouldn't want to be your horse. I've seen some of the horses. My gosh, what a tough life. Mm-hmm. Because you went and plowed, and it said you plowed, and then you ran a piece of equipment to smooth that seed bed, maybe 2 or 3, 4 operations, and then you hauled the manure all the way from the barn, and you hauled it back. Now you did 5 or 6 operations. Farmers doing 5, 6, 7, 8 operations. In the Boot Heel, Missouri, it's 16 or 18. And they wonder why they're going broke. Over there, we count $15 to $25 for every time you turn that tractor on. It's not for free. Same thing with that horse. Mm-hmm. It's not for free.
And horses are insanely expensive right now. A good team of horses, you're going to spend $10,000 on a team of horses.
And they're beautiful, and you have to take care of them. And they need energy. Mm-hmm. It's about transforming energy, whether it's in a horse or in horsepower. There's where we're going broke. We're taking too much energy to produce a product. In the United States, you need 10 calories of energy for every 1 calorie of food. In the natural system, say you were a predator, and if it took you 10 times as much energy to get 1 calorie of food, you're dead. You're dead. You cannot survive that. And so it's the way we look at these systems and how, like, for example, I was having a discussion with one of the persons yesterday. I said, and his name was Raymond. And I said, Raymond, I said, you're going to go plant corn. You're going to go put corn in that little plot. Why wouldn't you put a 5-way mix? Sudan grass, millets, cowpeas, huge biomass. Do this beautiful cocktail mix. No fertility. The legumes will share fertility in that mix. Get huge amount of biomass. Some of our mixes get biomass of 18,000 pounds to the acre. You harvest it, no fertilizer, no pesticides, no fungicides, no nothing. And even if you did already use it, but you didn't buy that expensive seed, whatever you bought, and most people will buy when it's organic, it'll be non-GMO, but still, you still haven't, and there's a lot of bare ground between corn for quite a while where you're growing, but in these mix, you have 10 species mimicking the architecture of the forest and the prairie. Beautiful. And then you come back again and drill into it again. You get harvested, the Sudan grass would come back out again, because you took silage one time, and the sundown grass will come up, and you can graze that one. And then go back in with a cool season mix. 3 operations versus how many you did. And so it's just the way you think. And he sat there and pondered, but there was a young man sitting in the discussion. He goes, that makes sense. So I said, why are you working so hard? A lot of times we work too hard because we're not thinking out that whole system. See, in college, we weren't taught systems thinking. And that's what we're trying to accomplish, systems thinking. Think in systems and also stack. Gabe talks to us a lot about stacking operations. Well, nature does the same thing. Organisms stack operations and functionality. Your farm should be stacking up functional operations and everything. That's why the farms that are the most diverse, like the Seven Sons in Indiana, those guys, they they support 13 families on 500 acres.
Wow.
Why? They stack functionality. Pasture pork, pasture chicken, pasture beef. They're incredibly awesome businessmen. And like you said, and they didn't go to college. Most brilliant. Businessmen took it directly to the people. See, the Amish plain community can do the same thing. They can stack operations on their operation. They can work as a collective. Mm-hmm. And yet they could hire somebody to use the internet that they don't use, but that Grace software that the Seven Sons have is brilliant. The people pay for everything on the credit card, and all they do is they have the vehicle and they deliver it to the points. And you've got to be there within 30-minute window to come and pick up your food. That was quality grown. Paid already. It's already done. They have 2,000. They have over 2,000 customers, guys. And they're always communicating with their people. The world is seeking quality. Why is this happening? Let thy food be thy medicine. And I think the organic people understood that a long time ago. They promoted that. But what I've seen also, they've been also contaminated with industrial ag. Mm-hmm. And so that's another topic in itself. Mm-hmm. But that's what we've been learning about this.
And people, you mentioned, people want quality food.
Yeah.
But there's also this longing for getting connected with your food.
Yeah.
Learning where it's coming from, learning about it versus just going into a supermarket and buying all kinds of stuff that's out of season. So many people don't understand that you shouldn't be able to buy watermelon in January in Ohio.
Yeah.
But that longing for that connection back to the land and back to knowing where their food comes from is a huge movement. And I think it's absolutely wonderful.
I agree with you, Mike. And I think I had some South Africans and Australians come. The first thing they said about American food, got a lot of sugar. And they wonder why we're fat and obese in this country. As we were talking last night, it's processed food and sugar that was the destructive thing, not the beautiful fat that came from pasture-raised raw milk or the butter of these scientists. And if you look at the story, how that all started, it was one scientist that pushed his view and had this insatiable, arrogant attitude of pushing in, and he had this, and everybody follows.
With funding from the sugar industry.
Yeah, very poor science. Very poor science. And we found out that we're getting sick with sugars and processed food. And it's not that fat that they told us don't eat lard. I remember that, don't eat lard, and they pushed us into this vegetable, which causes the problem, vegetable oils and the soybean oils and all those other oils that just are not good for us. Our body doesn't know what to do with it. And then we get milk that our body says, what the heck is that? It's homogenized, and what's the other? And pasteurized. And kill all the biology, alter its chemical. Alter it the way it's structurally done. And the body says, oh, what is that? And then you wonder why it's milk intolerant and why people are moving to coconut milk. Mm-hmm. Ridiculous things like that. We're in a society, and here's a major fundamental problem with the whole thing. Our farms in the United States are way too big. They're too big. We have a human and animal distribution problem. We have too many humans in the city, human CAFOs, and we have too many animals confined. They need to be in the land. They need to be grazing. They need to be stimulating the ecosystem processes. They should be grazing. The plant and animal and cow, they're connected. They should have never been separated, not put in a feedlot. So we have that problem. We have confinement of humans in one area, animals in one area. So then less than 2% of the populace feeds 350 million people. It's insane. And then we wonder why we have all these problems. That's why people don't have time to cook anymore. Mm-hmm. They don't have time for community anymore. And so there's a systematic problem. It's a systemic problem. And it affects everything else. Again, if you look at the collective whole, everything's connected. So you can see the problems all over, and it starts back from the farm. Mm-hmm. And yet the farmers are going bankrupt and committing suicide. Farmers have the highest suicide rate among the top 5 or 20 careers, according to the Center of Disease. Major issue. So all of this is connected.
Yeah. I think this goes back to one thing that Wendell Berry said when we had him on. He said, there is an eyes to acres imbalance. And when you said the exact same thing, we need more people on the land.
Yes.
But the system, like you said, it's a systemic problem, but that is the way that the system has been designed.
Yeah.
Specialization, and then that leads to monocropping. You become specialized in your soybean and corn rotation, and then the animals go away from the farm, and then they need the chemical reliance. They need the 10 calories to make 1 calorie of food, mm-hmm. and it just, it builds on itself. Then that goes to the people, and it just never ends.
And sadly, look at the organic. They're following the same suit that they fought for many years, like the hydroponics that they let. I said, really? It's not soil. You cannot match the soil. If that was the way the good Lord intended, we should all live in aqua world and everything should be an ocean. There's a reason for the soil, and it's a different body. It's totally different from the ocean, or same functionalities in some similar ways, but it's different. And yet they let this happen to them. And so it's all about one thing, like you were talking about, Brian, is money. It's the corruption of that money, and then the pressures too. But the pressures are just as hard on the organic people too. The competition, more people are becoming more organic. The prices are going down. People don't appreciate the cost it takes to get food. Mm-hmm. People say, "Well, America pays the cheapest amount for food." Well, actually, that's not true. Figure how much conservation we have spent, billions. How about the farm programs? Billions. It's not for free. It's like a Ponzi scheme. You just hide where the thing is gone. Food is costly, but quality food is worth it. We could change a lot of our medical issues if we eat quality food. And it's just not the micronutrients. I think people get confused. They focused on micronutrients. They are important. Do not misunderstand me. Regular nutrients are important, but phytonutrients, what does that mean? These precious molecules of the organic form, like amino acids and all these complex molecules that we do not account for because it's expensive to measure. That's where the party's there. It's not just micronutrients. If micronutrients were the story, then Liebig would have been a genius. Liebig, you guys remember, he created a baby formula, as the story goes with the narrative. He says, well, he was an inorganic chemist, and he said, well, I can just put stuff together and replicate mama's milk. Not. The children got sick. Those molecules that cannot be made inorganically, it brought health to those children. It's the biomolecules. What do I mean by that? When there's a carbon molecule attached to it, it's a biomolecule. It's not inorganic. There's no carbon attached to it. There's no biomolecule to it. And we sit there and they throw rocks at each other. Well, look, organic, it got more inorganic, more micronutrients than this. That's nice. But are you having the biomolecules there too? And those are expensive, and rarely do we talk about that. So it does matter how you farm. Mm-hmm. It reflects in the food. So like Dr. Chris Nichols says, she saw in some of her preliminary research, if you keep disking that ground or working that ground, it showed that these biomolecules came from fungi. Some of these biomolecules suppress, and she was talking about how this actually was coming from medical research, that they were looking how some of these biomolecules from fungi were suppressing dementia, reducing the inflammation of arthritis, but they could not find it in soils that were heavily tilled. So, but the organic farms that if they tilled rarely and did amendments, sparsely tilled, they were present. But they were always present in the no-till fields. So that's the hardcore reality about knowing how to be careful how you do your disturbances. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I thought that was fascinating. And that's where we're heading with this type of farming. We're going to a new system called regenerative farming, beyond organic. Because a lot of organic farms I've been, to be honest with you, have been harshly tilled. Mm-hmm. I tell my organic farmers, you till too much. But I also tell my no-tillers and my conventional, you spray too much. And so not only spray too much, and till too much, and no diversity. Mm-hmm. So it's going beyond. It's like you were telling me about your dad. Mike, it seems like your dad understood a lot, and he was doing a lot of the right things. And even under a disturbance like tillage, he was having a good functional system. It's how he did it.
But I think you bring up a good point that the no-till system or the minimal tillage system, both of them can work, and both of them can be extremely abusive to the soil.
Yeah.
So when you look at somebody that raises 5 consecutive years of corn no-till and roundups it every year, that soil is there to just hold the seed. There's nothing there. It's deader than a hammer. So that no-till system is kind of the no-till system where I grew up that people think when they think no-till. They don't think no-till in the way that you're describing no-till. Yeah. So the organic people have this mindset against no-till because of the conventional guy, the way he no-tills, and the conventional guy has this concept of, well, organic farmers grow nothing but weeds in their corn. So it's the two completely different systems that are both abusive.
Yeah.
And they can both work if they're done right.
You're right. We and I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because let's make it to the audience. The no-till we're talking is a no-till where we're growing 6-foot multi-species cover crops and we're rolling and we're no-tilling. These no-till systems that I'm talking about no longer use fungicides, no longer use insecticides. They don't use seed treatment. They're down to maybe 1 or 2 herbicide application, period. Their soil health and functionality is out of this world. Completely changed that soil. No-till was following the principles of nature, but it left the most important part out, feeding the biology. And that's why people talked about stratification in no-till systems. Well, when you have a living root, that is your tillage. There's arthropods, all those biology making their life in that soil, the earthworms and all that. That's the aeration process, the natural way. That's the system I'm talking about. You're exactly right on, because I think what happens, people start throwing rocks at each other and they fight about tools. But what they should be thinking about, what is the level of the understanding of that person? The farm reflects your understanding, how you use your tools. You have to have the right mindset, the proper understanding, so you pick up the skills and use the tools correctly. But what do? We fight with each other and throw rocks at each other because of the tools. Whether you till or whether you spray, I said, guys, know that each of those tools are painful. It's like a chainsaw. Great tool. Cut your hand off.
Real quick.
And real quick, you die. Die financially. What is killing us is the misuse of our tools, and they're expensive. They're costly. It may be more cheaper in the Amish community, but like you said, Mike, that's what I paid for my tractor. $10,000 for that team of horses. So it's not that cheap either. But these farmers, some of these farmers are paying $300,000 to $400,000 for a tractor.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what? And then the harvester they have. So where's the stress coming? They're maintaining multi-million dollars of infrastructure. And so it pushes them to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then what frustrates me is when I teach a producer of regenerative farming, first thing he wants to do is go buy more land because he can save more money. I said, outcompete his neighbors. I said, are you insane? I said, don't you want a marriage? I don't know about you, but I love being around my wife. It's about quality of life that we don't ever talk about either. Mm-hmm. What is the quality of life in the plain community and the English community? And I would guarantee it sucks a lot of times. All the pressure, all the hard work you have to do and get very little in return. That's what's happening. That's why this movement's growing, guys. It's in both sides. They work and they work and they work, but everybody gains a little wealth on the whole system. Everybody's got their hand in their pocket. Everybody's selling. You know what the thing I noticed yesterday at the conference? Everybody's selling something. Mm-hmm. Tools. You got to use this. You got to use this. You got to use that. What we teach, you don't need anything besides plant and animal. Beautiful story. Freedom.
Right there, that's the key right there, is the plant and the animal. Mm-hmm. The animal is missing in so much land. Well, if you look at Illinois, look at the amount of hogs and cattle that were in Illinois when you go back into the 50s and 60s. You know, what did they say? 90% of the corn in Illinois was fed in the county it was raised in, mm-hmm. and now it's less than 10%. You know, it's pretty obvious why it's not working. I mean, we turned the system that was kind of working and just turned it upside down. Mm-hmm. So we just buy bigger tractors and bigger combines and farm more land so we can make $10 an acre and survive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like when I learned that animals were very critical in the system was Sir Albert Howard. I don't know if you guys ever read any of his works. That is his writings are wonderful. Sir Albert Howard. He ran an extension. He ran an experiment station in India, I think, way back, turn of the century, and he said, "Nature never farms without animals. Never." We think about it. All the critters, the deer, the chickmunks, all these animals, their dung, everything gets cycled. Nature is brutally efficient. And I've heard certain scientists say nature's incredibly inefficient. I said, wow, what a reductionist thought process. They saw only one piece of their tiny little world. It's brutally efficient. And you're right, Mike. We did something really horrible. We took the animal out of that system. Every person, there's some people now that are applying no-till, the multi-species cover crops, and bringing the animals back into the system, and they're fencing. They're fencing their whole farm. I have one producer in Indiana who used to farm 5,000 acres, going down to 3. Fenced all 3,000 acres. Think about this: $10,000 to $15,000 land, completely fenced. And he's putting watering systems. And he says, I said, Dan, why are you doing that? He says, Ray, I don't want to spray anymore. And he's one of the top no-tillers and I would say he was one of the top no-tillers. He says, but we're missing something, like you said, the animals in the system. By the way, I want to get completely away from there. And he says, and the other mantra, he says, Ray, there's a difference between renting the land and owning it. And so he's pushing for that $10 corn and that extra where you can get that organic price. But at the same time, he told me he went from spending $1.2 million in chemicals, fertilizer, and inputs to this year $250,000.
And his yields probably weren't that different.
No. And he says he's laughing. I said, wow, Dan. But what did it take? What did it take for him to get there? An epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
He started educating himself. He didn't have any filters, and he went all over the country. I think he went to one of these type of, I think he was selected to go travel, and I think it's called a Road Scholar, I think. And you go in there and you collect, and he goes to see various agriculture, and he came back, and he's been exposed to the teachings of soil health and agroecology. Changed. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful because now that man is heading down to freedom. And what's another thing that's pushing him? He's got 2 or 3 sons that want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot do it in the current system that we have.
Mm-hmm. But I think some of it is willful ignorance as well,
Yeah.
because it's a simple system,
Mm-hmm.
the way agriculture is set up right now, and because of peer pressure or lack of desire to learn, it's easier to just do the same system and just be on that hamster wheel. Yeah. And I think the smaller scale farmers don't look at it as nearly as risky as the huge scale farm. So the small scale farm, if they try a little something, it's not going to upset the apple cart as much as when you're talking experimenting on 1,000 acres, where a small farm might be experimenting on 3 acres. Percentage wise, it's the same, but it doesn't look as scary to do it on a 3-acre field than it would a 1,000-acre field.
Yeah. And that's why I say start off slow, learn the skill set, but you're never going to get the skill set if you don't change the mindset. I said the land is healed one heart, one mind at a time. If that mind and your heart's not in it, you're not going to do it. Don't do it. I tell producers, don't even bother. You're wasting your time. You're not committed. You're not ready. Because what's the thing you have to do about this type of system? You have to think.
Mm-hmm.
You have to manage. And a lot of people, let's face it, we're lazy. Mm-hmm. We like to do. We want to do the least possible. Then we get into these. How do you call these patterns? And you don't get in a pattern with nature. Mm-hmm. She'll kick you in the teeth.
Well, when you look at, something comes in and wipes out a deer herd or something, that's nature being completely brutal and fixing her own system. We had a rabies outbreak in raccoon years ago.
Yeah.
Wiped out. There's more raccoon now than there ever were, but at that time, it just wiped them out and they came back stronger. But it's nature, like you said, is brutal. And nature will always win.
Yes.
Nature's never lost, to my knowledge.
And she's also incredibly forgiving. Case in point. Remember last night we were talking about, when I talked to the audience yesterday, nature's self-healing, self-organizing, self-regulating. Now, what does that mean from the farmers that are listening to this program? Case in point. According to Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, entomologist, for every one pest, there's 1,700 beneficial insects. So insects multiply every 1 hour in general. Why are we not covered with thousands of feet of insects? Why aren't we invaded by insects? Nature regulates it. So in a practical sense, what does that mean to a producer? If you're patient and wait for the beneficials, if we were all diverse, it would take care of itself when you had a pest outbreak. But because we don't, we use too much insecticides, too much bare ground. See, people don't understand, when you have tilled bare ground, you leave it bare, where is the beneficials going to make some of their habitat? You've diminished their habitat. You've sprayed it. You gave them no home. And then we wonder why we, again, addicted to the pesticide treadmill. Okay? So self-regulating, self-healing. Our body does the same thing. Self-heal, self-regulate, self-organize. Every morning you wake up, there's new cells being formed. Self-healing, self-organizing, self-regulating. Well, so what happens when that stops? It's called sickness and death. The soil's the most self-healing, self-organizing, self-regulating thing you can do on that farm. You ready? Cover crop. As soon as the corn gets out, as soon as the soybean, your wheat or your alfalfa, don't leave it bare. Your father was wise. Maybe not totally get why he did it, but he could see it. Mm-hmm. Self-healing, self-organizing, self-regulating. The moment you put that living cover again, it starts, the plants and the microbes work in synchrony to modify the habitat, start the healing process again. Whoa, pretty cool. Animal plant, pretty simple. And it doesn't come in a jug. Mm-hmm. And so people get mad at me and say, well, Ray, are you guys stuff in the jug? I said, I'm not saying that. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. But you can put all the microbes out there you want, but if you don't get farmers to stop tilling so much and stop spraying so much, it's a worthless endeavor. It's that system. And I cannot get people to understand that. Wrap around that their minds. Start thinking a system. Okay, you put a bug out there, but you gave it no habitat. You gave it no food. Where do you think the soil feeds? It feeds with that continuous living root in there. It's taking sun and transforming it into this myriad of molecules, hundreds of compounds that feed and modify the environment. Not only modifies it, but feeds those organisms. Pretty cool stuff. Mm-hmm. That's why cover crops are not optional.
Because I think, and I'm seeing more of this that I find it really exciting, is especially guys who put up corn silage. They're going with shorter season corns to give their cover crop a better chance to really go, and then they can graze it in the fall yet, going into winter, go through it, graze it one time quick, let it come back, and then in the spring they've got that plow down. It's a beautiful thing. They're maybe sacrificing a ton of corn silage per acre with going with a shorter season, but now you're seeing cover crops that are 2 feet tall in the fall. It's wonderful.
I love that. It's because now you're seeing the whole system. You have to look at the whole rotation. Sometimes people want me to give them a prescription. I said, I can't do that. It's like Dr. Dwayne Beck says from South Dakota, well, because people always want prescriptions. He says, well, I didn't choose your wife. Why am I choosing your rotation? I said, so the thing about it is you have to systematically look at the whole farm as a unit, and you have to have longer rotations. You need to work, and so the main goal is, how do I bring more animal and plant diversity into my system? That's the concept, and lay the whole farm out. Don't take one piece of you got to look at it, and you have to think through this, because rotations you should think 7 years ahead. What are you going to? What are you going to be doing? What's your plan? And so that's very critical in this. You have to think it out as a system approach. How can you inculcate diversity in everyone? And then also on top of that, how can you stack operations of various functionality? Like, for example, can I bring sheep in? Can I bring cattle in? Can I bring pigs in? What can I do economically? In some ranches, I'll never forget Jerry Doan. He talked about when his boys wanted to come back to the ranch. Every son that wanted to come back to the ranch, he did not expect the cows by themselves to pay for all 3 or 4 families. Each son had to bring a new enterprise into the operation. So what did that mean? One of the boys created they built a beautiful cabin for weddings, and then the other ones brought for hunting. So they bought different streams of income, just like nature does. She never puts all her energy in one conduit. She spreads it around and shares that energy source. Same thing, financial source, when you have with the Plains community. You should be able to sell maybe grow your wheat, but produce the bread. But you also have this other, maybe you have sheep, you have cattle, you have. Now what you've done, guess what you've done? Now not only do you have ecological resilience, but you have economic resilience. Now that makes you handle any financial disturbances and ecological disturbance. You're resilient. That's what we want on the operations. Don't focus, like the dairies here. So what do you raise? Dairy milk. Wow. So if dairy goes to the toilet, you're stuck. Mm-hmm. You're not a resilient system. Dairy farmers are just, okay, so you might be doing cover crops, you may be doing that, you've got all your crops, but you produce one product. You only sell one product out of that farm. You're a monoculture. You're not resilient. You need to bring all kinds of things out of that dairy. But no, I only want to do dairy. Knock yourself out. You are not resilient financially. And maybe you're not even as resilient as you can be ecologically. So you got to understand there's got to be several things leaving that farm. But if you put your eggs all in one basket, you're stuck. And you're at the mercy of those who buy that one product. Mm-hmm. That's why when I go back in my operation, I'm not only going to raise sheep, but I'm raising honey. And I'm going to do eggs. I got 3 things coming out of that farm that I'm shooting for. I do not just want to stick with sheep because I'm stuck with that people that buy that one particular product. Why are we doing the same thing? And I think it's important, you guys, as you guys are educators in the Plains community, they too also have been trapped with the monoculture mindset.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of that happened because when I grew up, we had a flock we sold eggs to the neighbors. We raised, half a dozen sows. We had some sheep that Dad absolutely despised. Mm-hmm. But we had horses and cows, but all the markets for the pigs and the eggs went by the wayside because now if you raise eggs and sell it to your neighbor, unless they can go to the grocery store and get them for half price of what you need to break even. Right. So those little niche markets for animal diversity in our community is extremely tough to find a market for it. And that to me is really disappointing.
Yeah, right. And I think what happened is they're not using, that's what made Seven Sons so successful. They're not working as a collective. See, they could use the grace card and say, okay, because there's big communities around here, large cities that want quality. See, they don't have to do, they can use the technology, not themselves, but hire somebody to do the technology and yet find a venue for their product. Look, the Plains communities are going to have to do the same thing like everybody else. They're going to have to look for their markets and create a new construct. If they're not, they're going to perish. Mm-hmm. Period. We have now farmers. I had a young farmer, Darren Williams in Kansas. You know what that young man did? He started making calls. He wanted to find a place where he can get rid of his, sell his non-GMO product. There was no market. There was no infrastructure. That young man not only bought his own place to put the seed, but now it all paid dividends. Now he gets $1.50 more than anybody else gets for their corn or their soybean. Why? He called. He didn't sit there and just lay and take it. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to fight for this. You're going to have to change it. You're going to have people need to understand survival is not to the fittest, but those who are willing to adapt. You've got to change. Mm-hmm. The world is always changing around us. But the thing that helps with this incredible changing and alteration is adaptability. You've got to have an adaptive mindset. Nature, that's why we no longer call it the grazing, we call it adaptive grazing. Why do we call it adaptive grazing? You adapt, observe, watch, move the animals. You might group the animals tight one day, you give them more room the other day. Maybe you got to go on a vacation. Adapt. Adapt. And one thing we don't want to do, we get in this pattern and we don't want to adapt. And we hate change. But that's not the world we live in. The moment you embrace that, it's going to be a lot better for yourself.
Well, and I think one thing that we've seen, like you said, with the diversification, especially within the plain community, they've and it's happened all over the place, but specialize in producing milk. That's, primarily the folks we work with. We brought it on ourselves. We brought it on this community. I'm thinking of this right now, that because organic pricing was so high, there was no incentive to diversify. They could put all their eggs or all their milk in one tank, to not mix up the reference there. And because pricing was so high, they were making such a good living that maybe diversification didn't make sense. But guess what? Exactly what brought them into that industry and caused them to solely focus on producing milk is also what brought the big companies in, the big farmers. And what we're seeing right now is a downturn in that market. And we're moving into year 3 or 4 of a downturn in the organic dairy market. And now we're talking with farmers that absolutely have the hunger to diversify again because they see the need again.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is the conversation is starting to be had. Too many times it's the, neighbor selling eggs or trying to sell eggs to somebody down the road. But now we're starting to see, because the need is there again, conversations within the community of how can we collaborate to make this work so that we can continue our way of life. And that's happening not just, I'm using the Plain community as an example. That's happening all over the place. That's why people are looking at and so excited about your system and ideas, and like Gabe Brown and this Darren out in Kansas.
Yeah.
They're creating their own way. They have to.
They have to.
There is no other way.
It's like Gabe said, he was sick and tired of somebody dictating the price.
Mm-hmm.
He said, don't buy my product. But if you know that you're providing a product of integrity, nutritionally, but integrally grown by you, you should demand a better price. But you're going to have to find it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like some people hope they can find their future mate and it's going to land in the front yard. No, go seek. Don't expect your mate to land in the front yard and go, oh, there's my wife. But the same thing here. I mean, people want it to come to their place, and they're not willing to search and work hard for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not willing to adapt. Well, what's going to happen to those type of people will eventually wither away. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we'd love to keep, you wither yourself away. And it's because of your own mindset. And farming it's a tough business, but it's an incredibly lucrative business. Oh yeah, look at the word I said, lucrative. You can make a lot of money in agriculture, but you cannot make it working against the natural system. Will not win. That's why we're going broke. And I'm telling you, I have guys, if you go to a finished hog operation, these guys are maybe making 65, anywhere from 20 to $80 a sow or a hog, whatever they process. The guys that are doing pasture, $500 to $600 a hog, because it's pasture raised. Mm-hmm. It was nurtured in the living system, the natural system. People are paying for that. One thing I found out about this country, guys, there's a lot of wealth. Mm-hmm. It's a very wealthy country.
And the younger generations are willing to spend the money on quality food.
They are.
The baby boomers, not so much.
Yeah.
But it builds on itself, because I think one of the things we talked about last night is once we have, you almost become a food snob. Once you actually have that good food, you seek it out, you're willing to pay more for it, and then you go tell other people about it, and then all of a sudden this ball, and it's happening. It's slowly happening, but people are saying, well, and a big part of it too is that the system is being followed correctly, because one thing I think of is at first when grass-fed beef came out, there was too many cases of grass-fed beef tasting and cutting up like a Red Wing shoe.
Yep.
And now we are figuring out how to do it correctly.
It takes a lot of skill.
Yes, and it tastes phenomenal.
All my meat is grass-fed. I will not eat unless I'm tortured, like all of us understand when we have to go eat at a restaurant.
I know.
I don't even like to order steak, to be honest with you, because once you've had grass beef and you have the conventional, it's like you can taste it, you can see, but also for your health-wise, It's not the right omega complex, which affects our hearts. So you're always, like you said, we have become, Brian, food snobs. We have to be, because as you get older, as I do, you have to run on high octane.
Got to put that 93 in the tank.
That's right. It performs better, I'm telling you. Versus because sometimes I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a restaurant and after you ate, then you're going, why did I eat that? You don't feel very good.
That's, my wife thinks it's all in my head. But when I go out, you can go out to a really nice restaurant and eat, I never feel good. Because all the meat that we eat, we raise. 95% of the vegetables we eat, we raise. Have our own chickens. I mean, I'm sorry, I get great satisfaction about having 2 freezers stocked full of meat. The only thing that isn't grass-fed organic is a little bit of venison that's in there.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, I raise it all myself. And I wish people could feel the satisfaction you get from doing that. And Brian, you raise chicken. Maybe if you'd eat my chicken, you don't think it's that great. But in my opinion, it's the best chicken in the world.
Oh, no. It's good. Because once you've had pasture chicken, raised broilers, oh my goodness. It's because either if you don't like it, it's because you will like it.
Yeah.
Because I've had many people with our pasture raised chicken say, wow, I never knew chicken tastes like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a local guy that raises pasture-raised chicken, and so he'll go to these food shows and he'll have 2 crock pots. He'll go to Walmart and buy a whole chicken, and he'll put his whole chicken in crock pots side by side. Lift the lid and smell. One smells like chicken. The other one smells like chicken manure. I mean, it smells exactly like a chicken barn smells ammonia when you put it in a crock pot out of a confinement barn. I couldn't believe it.
Whoa.
I mean, it is bad. I'm like, that's why the pasture raised is so good, is because they're actually breathing air, not ammonia. So
that's an interesting concept. I'm going to have to try that because they might kick me out of the house. My wife said, get out of here with that chicken. Because we've all been spoiled with that. And here's the thing that saddens me. We have all these dairy farmers, and people are hungering for pasture-raised organic raw milk, and you can't get it. And then dairies are going broke. And again, this phobia, and then people will come in, well, you'll get disease, brucellosis, whatever they think, and then it's like people can't make their own decisions. It's like we're raising a nation of babies. And we don't want, we're afraid of everything. And so that's another thing. Another thing we need to think about real quick is that we need a more educated populace. Case in point, if they go to the store and they see this little dot already insect bite on an apple, it will not be consumed. Well, how did that apple become pristine with no insect bites? Well, it only took 40 insecticides. People don't understand. They're so visual, but they need to understand, if I have an insect bite on my apple, I'm good. Maybe I knew they didn't have any insecticide. Same thing with corn or anything we do. My gosh, if it has a little besmirchment, they won't eat it. The thing about it is they have to think about how it got so perfectly pristine. It didn't come by accident. It got drenched in pesticides. And so we have to change, and I think you alluded to this, Mike. We not only have to eat in context globally and regionally, but in time. Why are we eating pineapple in the winter? And it's going to take years and years, but I think it's going to have to take something people don't want to hear. It's going to have to take some tumultuous global thing that happens that suppresses the ability to do this. Because we can't keep doing some of the stuff that we do and hope to be regenerative. And so I think there's going to be a change. But unfortunately, humans only learn through suffering. That's just the reality of it.
Well, this goes back to, I was talking to a missionary who was in Haiti for years, and he said the only time that the church actually grows down there, or anywhere really, if there's hard times.
Yes.
That's because the church won't grow in good times. I had never thought about it until he brought that up.
Well, it's true because Dr. Timothy Keller gave a really good sermon showing about the Christian church. Christianity is growing globally, but it's static in the United States and diminishing in Europe, but it's growing everywhere. Why? Because, again, the suffering, that the Christianity gives people hope. And in fact, leading to that conversation, that's one thing that I think it's also led to a misinterpretation of the scriptures, is leading to the demise of our planet. Case in point, doctrinally, most of us have been taught that, well, why take care of the planet? God's coming back, and he's going to redo the earth. It's like giving Christians, it's like, well, why should I care? Why should I be engaged? Why should I take care of the planet? I can actually kick the walls. I can be a bad renter and trash it. And I don't think that's what because it was a horrible misinterpretation of the end times. It was really talking about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 A.D. That's what the book was written about, the book of Revelation. But see, people don't understand the Bible was written. It was written not to us, but for us. But that misinterpretation has created an ecological disaster from the Western world. Because they said, well, I'm here to have dominion and use it up. That's not what the scriptures talk about. In fact, God gives an incredible warning. I will destroy those who destroy the earth. Pretty sobering.
Yeah. My dad has talked about that for years. He said for the people that take scripture literally, he said, boy, when it comes to destroying the earth, they just conveniently miss that part.
He's right. And see, and the thing about it for me, I take that very, very personal because, and I think Joe Salatin, I give him so much credit. He wrote a beautiful book called The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, arguing that point. He, being a Christian and myself, I wanted to get a hold of him and send him a letter and said, Joe, thank you so much for writing that book because it took guts. Because he's challenging the Christianity. He said, look, we tout holiness and stewardship, but yet the farm has been destroyed, sending out people on the mission, and all the wealth hewn out of the land, destroyed and diminished. Our people, the people that profess Christianity, are most obese. Not all. I'm taking in general, the Bible Belt and that whole area. I don't want people getting upset, but we're challenging this paradigm. That yet we claim this, and then people that are non-Christians see it. They have every right to look at us in a very accusatory way. We're being hypocritical. Mm-hmm. We're saying no more of that. So if you start with wrong teaching, wrong premise, you come out with wrong results. That happened academically, and that happened spiritually in the churches. And it's interesting. If anybody has a theological or scholarly difference, they're not allowed to have an open discussion. There is no such thing as freedom of speech in this country. It is incredibly censored. People are very thin-skinned. They do not want to hear the other side. And I remember I just gave fact. I met in Indiana with a scholarly Dr. John Noe, who is arguing and says, look, our misinterpreting of the ancient scriptures has led to a lot of the demise culturally, socially, and ecologically. But yet he can get no format to be able to have an open discussion, an open debate in a church. And yet when they didn't like the message, they openly attacked him. Well, Joe Sultan is saying the same thing when one of the pastors read his book and preached that in the pulpit. Some of the farmers on the church attacked him. Mm-hmm. No open discussion. People don't want to hear that they were wrong. Mm. I will tell you, I'm wrong many times, and I will continue to be wrong. The flow of knowledge, guys, and wisdom flows through humility. No other way. And it's okay that we don't have it right. Somebody may have more knowledge. We should glorify in that. But I think we need to have this discussion and open it. And I'm glad you guys provided this format today. That we need to actually, one of my goals is that we hope sometime in the future we'll be able to start challenging our own teachings in the church that they were wrong. And it's led to social and cultural and ecological unrest. And we need to be sincere about it and honest about it and have that debate. So I'm excited about that because we need to take it. We do not approach that, again, if it doesn't go from the heart and mind, we're not really going to have major change, guys. And we need it because the planet needs it. And that's the way I look at it.
And I think that's really something that people have to understand. If you're destroying your farm, the diversity, or you're just with bad farming practices, that's wrong. You're not just a bad manager and a bad farmer. You're destroying the earth. Mm-hmm. And that's not right. But now it's just looked at as, well, he's just not a very good farmer, which is maybe a point, but there's no, I don't like to use the word guilt, but there's no guilt in farming in ways that are negatively impact the earth.
It's consciousness. One thing, Mike, is like, I remember with the philosophy of the way the end times we were taught in church, that why even go to college? I had the thought process, why should I even go to college? God's coming back anyway. That permeates all of Christendom. Mm-hmm. Think about what if I would have listened and not, how would I have provided for my family? That thought process permeates all in the Plains community, all the churchdom. That's what they teach. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying, even if they don't agree with me doctrinally, we're challenging that. We have others, there's many of us who say, that's not doctrinally correct. You misinterpreted. Again, this is the pinnacle of what we're saying. The Bible was not written to us, but for us. We took that out of context and put it to us. That was written for 2,000 years ago. And yet we're still living in that kind of thinking. Same thing in the scientific community. We're always growing in knowledge and understanding, but when you bring these topics up, two things you don't talk about: politics and religion. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry. We need to talk about it because it's leading to the demise of our planet. And we're challenging those doctrinal standings that were wrong because we took things and imputed it in us that weren't there. And so that's beautiful. And so that's cool. And so I'm saying I'm challenging people, start thinking for yourself. And then once we start having people like that, we're going to change the world. People like you guys, we're going to change this world. And I think we can wrap it up with this one thing I'm going to say, guys. I used to think that one person couldn't make a difference. And people used to say, you've heard it be trite and says, one person can make a difference. I'd smile just to be positive. Now, I was wrong. One person can make a difference. Mm-hmm. Every one of us make a difference. Subtle. And people ask me, well, what, Ray, can I do to promote regenerative ag? The way you purchase. Spend that little extra money. Go look for a farmer. Build relationship with them. Make a difference. You may be a senior citizen. Pray for the change of our agriculture. Get involved in the church. Challenge everything. Question. Be engaged. And purchase and give your money to those who are promoting regenerative agriculture. Make a difference. We all make a difference. And if we do this as a collective, as a community, and one thing in wrapping it up, I think we should think about building community of thinkers the same way. Do this together. collective wisdom is always better than the single wisdom of a person. Case in point, the Australians are getting together. There's a group of 100 Australian farmers to get together on a regular basis, twice a year. They're only mandated two things. One, you have to promise as a farmer that you're going to carry every one of these practices in a timely manner. Number two, each farmer has to do a demonstration plot and then share the data with the rest of the farmers. If you're not willing to commit to that, you're not allowed in the group. And so the head consultant says, if you're not willing to commit to those two things, I'll never forget Martin Hockey. He says, bloke, I want you to go home, look in the mirror, and call yourself a taxi driver. You're not a farmer. And I thought that was hilarious. If you're around the Australians, they're very blunt. They're very direct. So are the South Africans. So I think, again, I appreciate you two allowing me to be on your podcast, and I'm honored. I think we have an incredible journey together. So thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
I just was going to thank you for taking the time this morning. We really, really appreciate it.
One thing, do you want to talk a little bit about your soil schools that you put on?
Oh, thank you.
I would like to give you the opportunity to talk about where people can find more information on what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Mike. We, Gabe Brown, Dr. Alan Williams, David Brandt, we created Soil Health Academy. And we created Soil Health Academy. It's a nonprofit. And then we have Understanding Ag, the consulting part. So it's a two-pronged approach. The Soil Health Academy was built so that we can, we formulated that nonprofit so that people from outside can contribute. But the main purpose of that is to have 3-day schools that we can teach all these ecological principles. We teach them how to design their own multi-species cover crops. We teach them how to use the tools, whether it be a no-till drill, how to do less tillage. We teach them how to move animals. We teach adaptive management because we decided to break the schools into even smaller subtopics like ecological nutrient management. And then we got the other one because that can be a topic to itself. We teach how to use the right soil tests that mimic nature. They're more accurate. We teach them how to read tissue samples. We teach them all that in the ecological nutrient management school. In the basic adaptive grazing school, we teach them the basic concepts of how to move the animals and understand it. In the advanced grazing, we go into all of them are hands-on, but much more elevated levels of adaptive grazing. But in all schools, they're taught how the soil functions. They're taught diversity. They're taught agroecology principles. They're taught biomimicry. We go through a whole array. And the whole thing we want the purpose we did that is we want the farmer to have freedom and be obligated to nothing. Minimalist farming. They don't depend on no one except for animal and plant. We want the wealth to go to the farmer and rancher. A majority of the wealth to go to them. So the whole purpose of the school is to facilitate understanding how to mimic the natural system, how to work with it, how to nurture it, how to love it. And but the schools also build community. Those who come to our schools, they're put in this, all their emails and all their addresses are put together. And then every third Thursday of every month, they call in and we talk for 2 hours straight, asking questions. So it builds community. They get fed extremely well. Our schools cost $1,275. And people say, for the 3-day school, but we feed them 4 meals, all pasture raised. But most people say, well, that's a lot of money. I said, really? I said, don't come to our school if you think that's too much money because you're not ready. Because continue to pay for the $50,000 or $100,000 fertilizer bills and chemicals. You're not ready. Mm-hmm. The schools make no money. It just barely covers the cost and pays for the instructors. The purpose for the school, let farmers teach farmers. All of us farm. All of us have been involved in this, and we have failed many, many times. We want to teach people how not to fail like we did. You're still going to have some failures, but stop the big failures. Mm-hmm. And then the understanding ag part is the consulting part. People sometimes want us to assess their place and they want them to walk them through some of the things, then we have Understanding Ag, and that one's for profit. But keep in mind, we will not consult anybody unless they go to the school. What we don't want, we want no farmer to be dependent on us. Most consultants, a lot of consultants out there, want you addicted to product or to them. We don't want that. Once we know you're at a certain level, we fire ourselves. Wow, what a novel concept, right? There's too many people that need help nowadays. The person still wants our consulting because they need help continuously, and they have a very complex operation. Well, that's different. But we don't want anybody to be obligated to us, and vice versa. We want their financial freedom and wellness. We want them to be free. And the more they work with nature, the more they get that freedom. So that's what the basis of the school. It's called Soil Health Academy, and you'll find it. And just Google Soil Health Academy and Understanding Ag, and that's how you can get a hold of us. Okay. And my email is ray@soilhealthconsultants.com. But preferably, I prefer you get a hold of Kathy at Soil Health Consultants. She's kind of she's the one that keeps us in order. And
the cat herder?
Yeah, she's the cat herder. And I'm telling you, with four of us, so really, if you're going to have any, please, if you want more information, send it to Kathy at soilhealthconsultants.com. And that's how you can get a hold of us.
Ray, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys enjoying it.
Thank you.
So I hope